While you have Ferrari guys who babysit their cars, kind of treat them like museum pieces, you're not going to find Lambo guys that do that. Lambo guys are almost as bad as Mustang owners.
Oh, Jesus. Hi guys, today we're going to be going over the evolution of the Lamborghini Gallardo, the most rented car in South Beach. Who would have thought that in 2006, the Lamborghini Gallardo would have been the most subtle Lamborghini available today? We can see the evolution of the Gallardo in the Huracan, and we have some radical departure of the design language. Today, we're going to be going over it with some details. Jimmy here is going to join me and discussing some of those.
Hey, how are you?
How you doing, Jimmy?
Pretty good.
Tell me a little bit about the specs and the evolution of these two vehicles. We see that for once, the wedge shape that they've designed has made it more modern in the early eras. Dare I say a classic supercar now?
So it's actually funny you say classic because Lamborghini's iconic look is the wedge, and that started all the way back from the Miura, which was actually the first car to ever have a mid-engine layout. They were the first true supercar.
When you talk about the Gallardo, there's several iterations, and I don't know my Lamborghinis as well as I know my Ferraris. Maybe you could walk through some of those with me, because in the first generations there were subtle things that happened later on that got evolution in suspension and drivetrain and even engine sizes.
Well, so for the engines, from the Gallardos to the LP cars all the way up to the Huracans, the engines for the most part are the same. It's the same 5-liter V10.
Okay.
A couple differences in firing orders. The older Gallardos are an uneven firing order, but the actual basic blueprint of the 5-liter V10 has stayed the same.
Does that change the sound characteristics at all?
It does. A lot of people actually preferred the Gallardo sounds over the LP cars, and I think that might have played into the development of the Huracan, where they went back to this sound, because if you listen to a Gallardo and then you listen to an LP 560 or an LP 570, they do sound a lot different.
Okay, and walk with me the evolution of the vehicles. From 2004 to 2006, it was these cars, right? It was all-wheel drive standard. It were 5-liter V10s, is that correct?
So actually from 04 to I want to say about 2009, it was Gallardos.
Okay, got it. Okay.
And then they introduced the facelift, which are the headlights got a little bit shorter, the angles kind of changed a little bit, the taillights changed. With the LP cars, you get the styling cue changes, like the different headlight, different front bumper, different wheel options. Interior, for the most part, stayed the same, just a little more updated. You had options like diamond stitching. Some of the buttons were a little bit nicer. Steering wheels wrapped in a little bit of a nicer material, more perforated leather rather than standard leather. In the Gallardos, you can look at them for the most part and see the Lamborghini-ness of the cars. One of the cool things about the Gallardos that people really like, especially in the supercar market, is you can get them in a 3-pedal. It's a
manual.
Yes, it's a lot easier to find a gated manual Gallardo than it is an LP gated manual.
Right.
In these early generation cars, pre-Huracan, these were all single disc clutch cars.
Okay.
So the problem with the single disc cars, and actually to play on your joke about them being the most rented cars, I think a lot of companies did rent these out in South Beach.
They were paying for it with clutches everywhere.
To learn very quickly that it was a very bad idea, because early Gallardos, which is pre-2008, did not have, well, they used the original version of the clutch. In 2008 and beyond, these cars came with what was called an F-spec clutch, which was an OEM upgrade that Lamborghini figured out, hey, this isn't working out. We've got guys that are burning up clutches in new cars in 1,500 miles. And then you're talking about a $9,000 repair bill. On average, sometimes it could be more depending where you are.
Right.
So people really quickly learned that the E-gear car was not the more practical car to drive. It was actually more practical to learn to drive manual and get a gated car rather than an E-gear car, because you could save your clutch. On a good day, one of these clutches, and this is from me talking to Lamborghini service centers, on a good day, you'll get roughly about 30,000 miles out of one of these clutches, and that's for a normal consumer. If you're an avid enthusiast, you might get a little bit more, but about 30,000 miles is what you should expect before you start seeing signs of wear. So when you buy these cars, one of the first questions people ask is, what is the clutch snapshot? Because they want to know what the life of the clutch is like left.
To your point, what is in this specific example here that we're showcasing, what is something like the clutch wear index on this right now?
So this is actually my car, and we took it to have it professionally checked at an actual Lamborghini dealership so we can get full OEM manufacturer readouts on everything. And this car came back The dealerships actually don't give you percentages. Percentage.
They just give you like wear per millimeter.
Exactly, they go with millimeters. The percentage thing is kind of something that people on the forums have kind of developed. Oh, I've got about 50% clutch life left, etc. The dealership's going to give you a millimeter wear. So this particular car was 26,000 miles, and when we took it in, it was roughly right around 60 to 65% clutch life. So according to Lamborghini standards, that's not a bad thing, because if they were going to CPO this particular car, that clutch would actually pass for a CPO.
Okay, so it passes.
It does. And just driving it reasonably, driving it responsibly, and responsibly doesn't mean don't drive the car. No, it's a Lamborghini. Drive the car, beat on it, take it to red line, downshift, have fun with the car.
What else can we tell our viewers about what could be something to look for when you own these vehicles?
You're going to want to check the E-gear is going to be your first priority. You're going to want to make sure the E-gear is working properly. E-gear pumps do fail.
Okay, yeah.
Just all the actuators can fail in these things. Clutch life, obviously. You touched on the struts. Struts do like to start leaking on these things. On top of struts, the engines, at the end of the day, it's still an Italian car. They like to leak, especially cars that don't get driven very much.
You have like all the gaskets that just sit there and they permeate oil.
They swell, they start leaking. That's kind of a thing you want to look for on these cars. The steering rack is something you want to look into on these cars, because they are an all-wheel drive system. So you'll notice when you turn these cars really tight, it wants to lock and skip a little bit, or it makes a really kind of almost like a grinding noise.
That's part of this is part of the culture on this car, and that's part of the excitement with it. Well, you don't have a convertible loud V10 just to go around town being subtle and quiet.
And it looks like this. Yeah, so why, just driving the car makes you want to put your foot into the car.
Again, looking at this, compared to the Huracan, this is a subtle car.
And that is a very interesting point to make.
Let's shift over to the Huracan and look at some of the design language of what has changed. And right off the bat, wha-bam, wha-bam, everything is an octagon.
The Huracans came out right around that same era as when your McLaren started catching on, the 458s and 488s, and everyone kind of went to that real aggressive, angular, pointy, a lot of sharp lines design. And Lamborghini is the king of excess when it comes to making a crazy looking car. It's the poster car that every kid ever had with the Countach. They've always had the most aggressive looks. So it is funny to say, because now the Gallardo, which in 2006, if you saw one of these, you were like, oh my gosh, it's a Lambo, it's crazy, it's got all these lines. It looks very kind of subtle and dialed down in comparison to this that looks like it's ready to go fly a mission over a country like a stealth bomber.
This particular model is not giving us any subtlety points either. It's got a wonderfully dry forged carbon lip, hood, side skirts. I mean, it's even equipped with a VF Engineering supercharger that has over 800 horsepower. So again, and things have been dialed up to 100 over here.
So once again, just like we said earlier, it's a Lamborghini thing. Lamborghinis are icons of excess. And with that being said, these guys drive the cars, they beat on the cars, but they also like to modify the cars. A lot of people do that, but it's funny to say, like, this car is subtle in comparison to this car that has a VF Engineering supercharger, the carbon body, all this crazy stuff that's on it. But in reality, this is a subtle Lamborghini.
Compared to an Aventador, we're talking,
right?
Well,
not even to an Aventador. You've got guys around the world in these cars that are twin turbocharging these things, making 2,000 plus horsepower.
Yeah.
And again, it's a Lamborghini thing. Guys just do that with Lamborghinis. They're not afraid to personalize these cars, make them faster, make them handle better, make them look crazier. I mean, it's a Lamborghini thing. And it's something that some people hate, some people love.
Yeah, and to be quite honest with you, most of them I've seen are very loud shades of lime green and reds and whites, and this one with the flat black, or I should say satin black and gloss black and beautiful natural brown leather interior, this all works together. It does match, and it suits a lot for our example today, given that we're talking two different generations and two different design firms making one same style product.
Yes, I 100% agree, and this is definitely a very tastefully done Huracan, in the sense that it's not bright green with bright green seats. This is a very classy build, and you are starting to see, I think, people are gravitating to the Lamborghini side of things. And these are guys from other segments of the world, of the market of Porsche and the stuff, because Lamborghini does make a very good car, and especially with the new ownership under Volkswagen, they work. That's the best part about these cars, they work.
Well, we live in a weird time where you can have the charm of something that's become a classic modern sports car, or something that's just ready to go and be ready at all times without any sacrifices in performance. It's a pleasure to be able to share these two vehicles with you today. We are Euro Prestige Imports here at UnKnown Charlotte in Charlotte, North Carolina. And thank you, Jimmy, for joining us today and going over these two vehicles.
Anytime.
My pleasure.
Thanks, mate.